You know, when you look at a resume, there is this kind of ingrained expectation of just straightforward competence.
Right. Yeah, you
Yeah.
expect a certain linear progression.
Exactly. Like you see the top tier universities, the impressive job titles, the steady, undeniable progression of skills. And you naturally just think, okay, this person's an absolute superstar.
It creates a very clean, very comforting narrative. I mean, we inherently like things to be categorized easily. Success just looks like success, and the paper proves it.
Yeah, it's super binary. You're either in the elite tier or, well, you aren't. But imagine for a second that you are looking at a country's resume.
Okay, a national resume, I like that.
Right. And on paper, the credentials are just breathtaking. It is ranked firmly in the global upper echelon. You see top tier wealth, fantastic universal health care, virtually universal education,
Just checking all the boxes.
all of them. It looks like an absolute textbook miracle of modern human progress. But then you apply a special filter to this resume.
And this is where it gets interesting.
Ooh, it gets wild. It's a lens that reveals the true hidden cost of all that phenomenal success. And suddenly, right before your eyes, that country just plummets.
Just a total free fall.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a slight dip or like a temporary market correction. I'm talking about an astonishing absolute free fall,
Yeah.
55 places down the global rankings.
Wow, 55 places. That is massive.
It's insane. And that is the exact illusion we are shattering today on this deep dive. We're asking a core and honestly perhaps an uncomfortable question for you listening. Why does one of the world's wealthiest, most stable nations suddenly look incredibly fragile when we change the definition of what success actually means?
And to answer that question, we are opening up a remarkably comprehensive dossier today. It's the Brunei and Global Human Development Deep Observation Report.
Such a long title, but so much good data in there.
So much data. And what makes this document so vital is its scope, really. It covers the span from 1990 all the way to 2023.
33 years.
It's exactly. It is a 33-year longitudinal study of human progress. And it uses 5 progressively more rigorous lenses to evaluate that progress.
So think of these lenses as a series of filters we are going to place over the data for you today. We start with the HDI, the Standard Human Development Index.
Right, which gives us the absolute basics of survival and prosperity.
Yeah, health, education, and income. Just the raw baseline.
And then from there, we introduce the GDI and GII, which are the Gender Development and Gender Inequality Indices.
Because, raw growth means very little if it isn't distributed fairly, right? Especially across the fundamental demographic divide of men and women.
Precisely. And then we apply the IHDI, the Inequality Adjusted HDI.
I love this one. It's such a brutal metric.
It really is. It mathematically penalizes a country's average scores for its internal disparities across all social classes. It essentially measures the development that is stolen by inequality.
Stolen development. That's a great way to put it. And finally, we arrive at the ultimate reality check. The PHDI, the Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI.
The big one.
The huge one. This metric factors in the carbon emissions and the sheer physical material footprint required to maintain a nation's specific lifestyle.
And just to preview, this is the filter that triggers that 55-place free fall you mentioned earlier.
It's going to be quite a journey for you listening today. We're going from celebrating the absolute peak of human achievement to staring directly into the abyss of planetary limits.
A bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, buckle up. But to truly understand the shock of that free fall later, we have to establish a baseline first. We need to look at the global picture over the last 3 decades to understand what normal human development even looks like.
That makes sense. And if you look at the raw data, charting the global HDI from 1990 to 2023, the overarching story is actually one of a relentless, almost gravity-defying upward march.
It's actually a really positive chart for a while.
Very positive. In 1990, the global HDI was sitting at 0.608. By 2019, right before the world, fundamentally changed, it had climbed to 0.745.
Okay, I always find index numbers like 0.608 or 0.745 incredibly abstract. They're just sterile decimals. Let's translate that climb into the lived reality for the average person on Earth.
That's a great point. The translation is actually profound, that decimal increase. It represents millions of lives saved, extended, and drastically improved.
Like tangibly improved.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the global average life expectancy jumping from 65.1 years in 1990 to 73.4 years.
Over 8 additional years of life for the average human being.
It's staggering. Think about the compounding value of 8 extra years. That is, more years with grandchildren, a significantly longer window of productive economic contribution.
Right, more time to accumulate and pass down knowledge.
Exactly. When we look at the progress bar of human history, shifting the baseline of human existence by nearly a decade in just 30 years is a massive collective achievement.
It's the kind of background miracle that happens so slowly, so incrementally, we almost forget to acknowledge it. We just accept it as the new normal.
We take it for granted, yeah.
We really do. But that beautiful, steady upward line on the graph isn't unbroken, is it? The report shows a massive, jagged disruption.
The pandemic shock.
Yeah?
In 2020 and 2021, the data reveals a rare, historically devastating backslide.
I remember looking at that part of the chart. It's chilling.
After 30 years of climbing, the global HDI just stagnated, and it actually dropped back down to 0.742.
A drop of 0.003 on a global index. Again, it sounds mathematically tiny.
It does sound small.
But the human toll behind that decimal is catastrophic. I mean, it represents the unimaginable loss of life, the millions of kids suddenly locked out of the educational system, and all those localized economic collapses triggered by COVID-19.
It mathematically visualizes a global trauma. There's no other way to say it. But the data also visualizes resilience, which is important to highlight.
Oh, true. The bounce back.
Right. By 2023, the global average recovered, pushing up to 0.756. Humanity, on average, found its footing and resumed the climb.
Okay, but that phrase, on average, is doing a whole lot of heavy lifting there.
Oh, massive amounts of heavy lifting.
Because averages can be incredibly deceiving. Which brings us to the primary case study of this report, the nation that serves as our ultimate example of top-tier success, Brunei.
Let's talk about Brunei. If the global average in 2023 is a respectable 0.756, Brunei sits at a stellar 0.837.
0.837. Wow.
This places the country firmly and undisputedly in the very high human development tier. In the grand global ranking of over 190 countries, Brunei hovers right around the 60th or 61st spot.
They are the elite student. They are absolutely at the top of the class. And when you dig into the report to find the engine powering that 0.837 score, it becomes glaringly obvious what is driving their success.
It is sheer economic power.
Yeah, the money.
The money, specifically the gross national income, or GNI. Brunei's GNI per capita in 2023, adjusted for purchasing power parity, is roughly $75,826.
Okay, wait. Before we marvel at that $75,000 figure, let's define purchasing power parity, or PPP, for everyone listening, because we aren't just talking about a simple currency exchange rate here at the bank.
No, that is a crucial distinction to make. Purchasing power parity is an economic metric used to compare the absolute purchasing power of different countries' currencies.
Right.
It basically asks a simple question. How much does a standard basket of goods, like, bread, rent, basic medicine, a gallon of fuel actually cost in the local economy?
So if I have $10 in New York, it buys me very little. A coffee, maybe. But the equivalent of $10 in a local market in a developing nation might buy groceries for an entire week.
Precisely. So when we say Brunei's GNI per capita is 75,826 TPP, we are saying their citizens have the localized buying power equivalent to someone making nearly $76,000 in the United States.
Which is a very comfortable living.
Very. And to put it in perspective, the global average GNI per capita is only $20,327.
Oh, wow. So they are operating with an income that is 3.7 times higher than the global average.
Yeah.
That isn't just a slight advantage. That is a completely different economic reality altogether.
It really is. And what the report suggests is that this overwhelming economic power acts as a developmental moat for Brunei.
A moat.
I like that.
It artificially accelerates and pads their basic HDI scores. When a state possesses that level of wealth, which in this case is generated primarily by vast state-controlled fossil fuel reserves, it can rapidly deploy capital.
It can just build whatever it needs.
Exactly. It can build state-of-the-art hospitals overnight. It can construct modern schools. It can ensure a high baseline of public infrastructure. The wealth is the undeniable engine of their human development.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's kind of like a student who gets accepted into an incredibly elite Ivy League university.
Okay, follow you there.
Right. So their test scores are good. Their grades are perfectly fine. But when you look a little closer at their background, you realize they mostly secured their spot because their parents literally built the university library.
That's remarkably accurate. The credentials are real. The HEI score is mathematically sound. The hospitals exist. The schools are functioning and full of students. But the underlying foundation of that success, is it an organic, highly optimized societal structure, Or is it purely a function of overwhelming brute force wealth?
That is the tension at the heart of this entire deep dive.
Hmm.
Wealth can buy high averages. But, statisticians will be the first to warn you that averages are notorious for hiding deep societal cracks.
Oh, for sure.
You could theoretically have a country with a staggering average income, but upon closer inspection, you find one trillionaire and millions of people living in absolute poverty.
The classic example, right. If a tech billionaire walks into a crowded, rundown dive bar, the average net worth of everyone in that bar suddenly jumps to $1 billion.
Statistically, yes.
Statistically. But nobody sitting on a bar stool actually got any richer. Their lived reality didn't change at all. They still can't pay their rent.
Exactly. So to determine if Brunei's immense wealth is actually trickling down and structurally benefiting its whole society, we have to move past those raw growth numbers.
Right. We have to transition our lens from mere averages to fairness.
Yes. And the most fundamental division of fairness in any human society is gender.
Let's split the population down the middle. If you are born a woman in Brunei versus a man, does this economic moat protect you equally?
That's the key question.
And to answer that, we look at the GII, the Gender Inequality Index, and the GDI, the Gender Development Index.
But let's contextualize this with the global picture again first, because there is a massive, often underreported triumph hidden in the global gender data.
Oh, the global optimization stat. Yeah, let's talk about that.
It's incredible. The Global Gender Inequality Index has dropped by over 21% since 1993. It went from a baseline of 0.582 down to 0.455.
That's a huge drop.
In the cautious, slow-moving world of global demographics, a 21% structural optimization across the entire human species over just a few decades is seismic.
And when the report uses a phrase like structural optimization, I mean, we aren't just talking about abstract legal rights or the percentage of women on corporate boards, are we? We are talking about visceral, literal, life and death metrics.
We absolutely are. The primary driving force behind this massive drop in global gender inequality is healthcare, specifically the plummeting rate of maternal mortality.
Right.
The global maternal mortality ratio fell from over 378 deaths per 100,000 live births in the early 90s to roughly 216 today.
I think it's crucial for us to just pause here and really unpack why that specific medical statistic is the absolute linchpin for overall human development.
It's foundational.
It really is. It's not just a victory for public health, which of course it is, but advancements that keep women alive during childbirth literally rewrite the economic and intellectual future of a nation.
Well, consider the ripple effect.
Yeah.
Survival is the absolute prerequisite for any development.
You can't develop if you're not alive.
Exactly. When you dramatically reduce the risk of a woman dying in her 20s or 30s while starting a family, you are retaining her intellect in the workforce, her labor in the economy, her creativity, and her leadership in the society for another 40 or 50 years.
It's massive.
Furthermore, a mother who survives childbirth is there to ensure her older children stay in school, stabilizing the next generation. It compounds.
So globally, the baseline is improving rapidly simply because we are succeeding at keeping women alive, which is great. But how does our elite case study fit into this? Is Brunei simply riding this global wave of improved healthcare, or is their trajectory unique?
The data reveals that Brunei is doing much more than just riding the wave. They are practically rewriting the rules of gender equalization.
Wow, really?
Yeah. If you look at Brunei's 2023 Gender Development Index, the GDI, it sits at 0.993.
Oh, wait, for you listening who don't spend their lives looking at index charts, a GDI of 1.0 would represent absolute perfect statistical equality between men and women in basic human development.
Perfectly balanced.
So a score of 0.993 is practically identical. It's a statistical mirror image.
And what is truly fascinating is the underlying data that creates that near-perfect score. It's not merely a story of women catching up to men.
What do you mean?
In some crucial development metrics, women in Brunei are actively surpassing men.
Oh, fascinating. Let's look at those specific numbers. Where exactly is the advantage?
It is most pronounced in education. The female expected years of schooling in Brunei sits at 14.1 senior years.
Okay.
The male expected years of schooling is notably lower, at 13.25 years.
Wow.
So, on average, women are staying in the educational system almost a full year longer than their male counterparts.
A full year of education at the secondary or tertiary level is a massive advantage in human capital, like That translates directly to highly skilled labor. And it appears this educational momentum is bleeding into the political sphere as well, looking at these charts.
The political landscape is definitely shifting, albeit from a lower baseline. The share of women's seats in the national parliament has grown from 6.5% in 2016 to over 11% by 2023.
Okay, 11%.
Right. Well, 11% might still seem modest when compared to certain, say, Scandinavian models of governance. The trajectory is steep, consistent, and indicative of a rapid, synergistic evolution of female empowerment within the state's institutional framework.
Okay, I am looking at the data notes in this section of the report right now, and I have to push back on this perfect equality narrative for just a moment.
Fair enough. What are you seeing?
There is a glaring nuance in these numbers that feels super contradictory. We established that women are living longer, healthier lives, and they are significantly out-educating men.
Yes.
But when we look at the gross national income the actual money going into their pockets male GNI is still radically higher than female GNI.
Ah, you were looking at the income disparity.
Yes. The report shows men in Brunei are earning roughly $93,000 PPP on average compared to women at around $56,000.
It is a significant gap.
That is a chasm. That's almost a $40,000 difference. How on earth does the UN index arrive at a .993 near perfect equality score if the men are bringing home almost $40,000 more a year?
That is a brilliant challenge, and it cuts directly to the philosophical heart of how these indices are mathematically constructed.
Because it feels like a cheat code.
It can look that way, yeah. But the GDI is a composite formula. It forces a balance between three pillars: health, education, and income. You are entirely correct that there is a massive structural income gap favoring men.
Right.
However, mathematically, the superior health metrics for women, specifically their significantly longer life expectancy and their superior educational attainment, mathematically offset the income gap in the final calculation.
Wait, let me make sure I'm fully grasping the mechanics of this formula. The index is fundamentally asserting that money isn't everything.
Essentially.
It's basically saying, yes, the women in this society make significantly less money than the men, but because they are much better educated and live substantially longer, their overall human development, like their capacity to live a fulfilling human life, is considered practically equal.
That is exactly the philosophical statement embedded in the math. The UN methodology implies that once a certain baseline of high wealth is achieved, meaning basic survival needs are more than met for everyone, additional income yields diminishing returns on actual human development.
Okay.
A longer, highly educated life is weighted heavily enough to counterbalance a corporate pay gap.
I am fascinated by that because it reveals how Brunei has utilized its vast national wealth. They haven't necessarily engineered perfect pay equality in the labor market, but they have built a state apparatus where women are structurally empowered through the institutions of schools and hospitals.
They have built a formidable social floor.
A social floor, which naturally begs the next question. We've established that the wealth, or at least the developmental benefits of the wealth, is trickling down effectively across the gender divide. The gap is mathematically closed.
Yeah.
But what about across different social classes? You can have a society with perfect gender equality, but still have immense poverty existing right in the shadow of massive wealth.
Absolutely.
Are the working class citizens in Brunei reaping the same baseline benefits from this oil wealth as the upper echelon?
And to answer that, we must discard averages entirely and apply our third lens, the IHDI, the Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index.
I have to say, I find this metric to be the most brutally honest tool in the entire report. It completely strips away the camouflage of the billionaires.
It really does. The IHDI is specifically designed to measure what economists call the development discount.
The discount, right.
It quantifies the amount of human development that is literally lost due to inequality within a society. Think of it as a penalty applied to the raw score.
Like a tax.
Exactly like a tax. If a country's development is perfectly, flawlessly equal across every single citizen, its standard HDI and its IHBI are exactly the same. But as the gap between the rich and the poor, or the educated and the uneducated, widens, the IHDI score falls, reflecting the reality of the marginalized.
Okay, so what does that development discount look like on a global scale, just so we have a benchmark?
Globally, when you factor in inequality, the world's overall human development score is slashed by a massive 22%.
22%. Wait, really? That is almost a quarter of all human progress just mathematically wiped out because it is hoarded at the top. It operates like a massive, invisible tax on human potential.
It is a devastating structural tax.
Yeah.
And the report meticulously breaks down the source of those global losses. 30.4% of this global loss stems purely from income inequality, the massive gulf between the highest earners and those in poverty.
Okay.
And another 21.5% comes directly from education inequality. So the life outcome gap between those who secure advanced degrees and those who are forced to drop out of primary school.
That makes total sense.
The global data tells a sobering story. Even as the overall economic pie gets substantially larger, the slices are severely pathologically uneven.
Okay, so a 22% penalty is the global baseline of human unfairness. Now let's apply this ruthless filter to our elite case study. Let's look at Brunei's IHDI.
Brunei's total penalty for inequality, their development discount, is a mere 9.7%.
9.7%. That is less than half the global average penalty.
It is.
That represents a stunning retention of human development across the population.
It points to a highly resilient, incredibly protective societal structure. If we dig deeper into the submetrics that make up that 9.7%, we see that Brunei's loss specifically from education inequality is only 10.1%.
Wow.
Even more impressively, their loss from healthcare inequality is an exceptionally low 6.9%.
Let's focus on that 6.9% healthcare inequality penalty for a second. Because what does that actually look like on the ground? It means that almost everyone in the country, regardless of their zip code or their bank account, is receiving roughly the same high-quality medical treatment.
Correct.
How is a nation engineering that level of equity? Because that's hard to do.
Well, it is the textbook outcome of comprehensive high welfare policies funded by immense centralized state wealth.
Ah, right. The oil money.
Exactly. When a government possesses the revenue stream of a major global oil and gas exporter, and it makes the explicit political choice to heavily subsidize the social safety net, you generate these exact numbers.
So it's a choice.
It's a choice. Universal free or highly subsidized health care, universally accessible free education. These institutions act as a concrete floor. They guarantee that regardless of a citizen's personal income level, their baseline quality of life, their ability to see a doctor or send their child to school is fiercely protected by the state.
You know, visualizing this 9.7% penalty alongside the massive oil wealth, it makes me think of Brunei as the state-of-the-art luxury cruise ship.
A luxury cruise ship.
Oh,
Okay, walk me through that analogy.
Think about the ecosystem of a massive cruise ship. Everyone on board is incredibly well fed at the buffet. Everyone has immediate access to the ship's medical bay if they fall ill.
Okay, true.
Everyone gets to lounge by the pool and read in the library. Now, sure, some passengers might have a slightly larger, more opulent suite on the top deck.
Right, representing the income inequality we saw earlier.
Exactly. The difference between the men and women's GNI, or between different professions. But fundamentally, every single person on board is safe, healthy, educated, and experiencing a remarkably high standard of living.
I see where you're going with this.
And most importantly, they are all safely insulated from the choppy, dangerous, unpredictable waters of the ocean outside. The immense state wealth is the reinforced steel hull of the ship, keeping the poverty out.
That is an excellent mechanical analogy. The internal equity of the ship is beautifully engineered. The distribution mechanisms for health and education are incredibly effective at keeping all the passengers comfortable. But, as with any massive vessel,
Right. What fuels the cruise ship? And what is the ship's exhaust doing to the ocean it sails on?
exactly. Because up to this point in the report, we have proven Brunei is undeniably rich. We have proven its population is healthy and highly educated.
Yes.
We have proven it is internally equitable, successfully shielding its citizens from the massive developmental penalties seen in the rest of the world.
It sounds perfect.
But no nation exists in a vacuum. Now we must flip the script and examine the external costs of maintaining that luxury cruise ship.
And this is where the narrative of the report takes a severe, almost chilling turn. We are applying the fourth and most demanding lens, the PHDI, the planetary pressures adjusted to THEI,
This is where development hits the physical boundaries of the Earth.
the ultimate reality check. The PHDI was introduced relatively recently by the United Nations precisely because of the realization we were having right now, wasn't it?
It was. It forces a vital, existential question into the mathematical models. It asks, what is the true quality of human development if the very process of achieving it fundamentally degrades the biosphere?
Because you cannot be a highly developed, flourishing human society if you do not have a habitable planet to live on. It's a paradox.
The methodology is straightforward but brutal. The PHDI takes the standard human development score we discussed earlier and discounts it based on two specific environmental factors:
Which are?
a country's carbon dioxide emissions per capita and its material footprint per capita.
Let's establish the global baseline for environmental damage first, just so we know what normal looks like. How much does the average nation get penalized for its planetary footprint?
Globally, factoring in carbon emissions and the material footprint shrinks the average human development score by about 10.1%.
Okay, so roughly 10% penalty.
Yeah, the world effectively loses a tenth of its perceived progress to planetary pressure. And this penalty is largely driven by the fact that global per capita carbon emissions currently hover around 4.5 tons per person annually.
Okay, a 10.1% drop globally, driven by 4.5 tons of carbon per person. That is the baseline of our collective environmental strain. Now let's look at the report's data on Brunei and finally reveal the mechanics behind the hook from the very top of our deep dive.
There we go.
What happens to Brunei's stellar 0.837 HDI when it is subjected to the planetary pressure test?
It suffers a catastrophic collapse.
Just collapse.
Yes. When Brunei is adjusted for planetary pressures, its score plunges by an agonizing 28.3%.
Oh my God.
It drops from the elite heights of 0.837 all the way down to a PHDI of exactly 0.600.
A 28.3% plunge. That is nearly 3 times the global average penalty. It is a statistical freefall.
It really is.
But I want to understand the how. Like, how does the math justify such a massive penalty? What is driving it so far down?
It comes down to the staggering emissions required to fund the state apparatus. Brunei's per capita carbon emissions are an eye-watering 26 tons.
Wait, 26 tons of carbon per person?
Yes.
That's insane.
Compare that directly to the global average of 4.5 tons we just discussed. The average person in Brunei, or rather the economy that supports that average person, is responsible for nearly 6 times the global average of carbon emissions.
6 times?
The environmental cost of maintaining their high welfare lifestyle and their state revenue model is extraordinarily heavy.
Let me paint the picture of what this means for the global rankings, because this is where the illusion completely shatters for you listening. In the standard HDI, that pristine resume we looked at initially, Brunei sits proudly around the 60th or 61st spot globally.
Right, they're in the club of the global elite.
But the moment you apply the PHDI filter, the moment you account for the exhaust from the cruise ship, Brunei freefalls 55 spots down the list. They crash land at 115th place.
It is a devastating mathematical correction.
Yeah.
And what this implies is that over half of Brunei's perceived developmental success is entirely wiped out by its environmental costs.
Over half.
Over half. The miracle of their highly equitable development is not organic. It is heavily, unsustainably subsidized by ecological debt.
This data just blows my mind because it forces us to ask a really uncomfortable, incredibly broad question. Does this mean the entire model of high human development as we currently understand it in the West and in resource-rich nations like Brunei, is that model fundamentally, perhaps fatally flawed if it inherently requires this much planetary damage to sustain?
That is the million-dollar question.
Are we just celebrating a developmental success that is actually just a slow-motion disaster?
If we extrapolate the data from this report to the bigger picture, the answer is leaning heavily towards yes. Sadly, yes. The metrics we used in the 20th century to define success like pure economic growth, rapid infrastructure expansion, they're proving radically inadequate for the realities of the 21st century.
Yeah, because the Earth has limits.
Exactly. And to truly understand why Brunei's penalty is so severe, we can't just look at invisible carbon gas in the atmosphere. We have to look at the physical stuff, the actual literal weight of their consumption.
Right, the second half of the PHDI calculation, the material footprint. What exactly does that term mean in the context of this data?
The material footprint metric is designed to measure the total physical amount of raw materials extracted globally to meet the final consumption demands of a specific country.
So everything they use.
Everything. It is comprehensive and includes all biomass, all fossil fuels extracted, all metal ores mined, and all non-metal minerals used in construction.
That sounds heavy.
It is the literal physical weight of a country's lifestyle and economy. Globally, the average person consumes about 12.7 tons of natural resources every single year.
Okay, 12.7 tons of physical earth being mined, harvested, or extracted to support one average human. So what does the material footprint of our elite cruise ship look like?
The historical data presented in the report is staggering. If we look back to 1997, Brunei's per capita material footprint peaked at a massive 44.2 tons per person.
44.2 tons. Oh my gosh. I'm trying to visualize that. That's the equivalent weight of roughly 20 mid-sized cars extracted from the earth per person in a single year.
It's a mountain of material.
What were they doing with all that material?
Well, it is the inescapable physical reality of an extraction-based economy.
Right, the oil.
Yeah. When your entire national wealth is predicated on extracting, processing, and exporting oil and gas, the sheer material weight of the heavy infrastructure, the sprawling refineries, the pipelines, the shipping logistics, it adds up incredibly fast.
That makes sense.
And combined with the high import consumption of a suddenly wealthy populace demanding foreign goods, that drives the number into the stratosphere.
It's a perfect storm of consumption.
It is. And while the report notes that it has come down since that 1997 peak, today, in 2023, it still hovers over 20.4 tons,
Which is still.
vastly higher than the global average of 12.7 tons.
So we have an undeniable, basically self-destructive logic chain here, and the data lays it out perfectly. High income, which is driven exclusively by fossil fuels, leads directly to high consumption.
Yes.
That high consumption requires a massive material footprint and generates massive carbon emissions, and those environmental realities ultimately trigger a dismal PHDI score. It's a trap.
Is the definition of the pathological oil trap. The economy relies entirely on the very mechanism that destroys its long-term viability score.
You know, trying to reconcile these three pillars of data like the amazing social metrics,
Right.
the incredibly low inequality, and the absolutely devastating environmental costs, I think we need to update our analogy.
Okay, let's hear it. How do we move past the luxury cruise ship?
It's like looking at a professional bodybuilder.
A bodybuilder.
Yeah. You look at them on the outside, up on the stage, and they look incredibly, unbelievably healthy. They have perfect, bulging muscles that represents Brunei's universal education and high life expectancy.
Yeah, and track that.
They have incredibly low body fat that represents the low inequality, the 9.7% IHDI penalty where everyone is taken care of. They look like the absolute peak of human potential.
But the physique isn't natural.
Exactly. You look at their blood work, and the blood work shows they are consuming absolutely toxic, lethal amounts of synthetic steroids to artificially maintain that incredible physique. The steroids are the 26 tons of carbon emissions and the massive material footprint. The outside looks perfect, but the internal injure is quietly destroying the organs.
That is a brutally accurate refinement of the metaphor. The education and health metrics are robust and real. Brunei's life expectancy is 75.3 years. Their schooling is excellent. The soft social metrics are beautiful.
They are.
But the hard metrics, the chemical reality of what fuels those social metrics, are devastating. The bodybuilder cannot maintain that physique forever without eventually facing a systemic organ failure.
Right. So, if this model is a biological dead end for the bodybuilder and an ecological dead end for the nation, what is the ultimate conclusion for a resource-dependent civilization facing a rapidly decarbonizing future?
That's the real issue now.
Because the global market is desperately trying to move away from oil, and Brunei's entire luxury cruise ship is currently powered by it.
This raises the most important question of the entire deep dive, and it is the exact focus of the academic synthesis in the final section of the report. The authors present a very clear diagnosis for this condition.
Let's unpack this academic critique because the data isn't just a list of numbers, right? It's a diagnosis of a structural vulnerability.
The formal diagnosis is that Brunei is caught in a state of severe path dependency.
Path dependency, meaning they are locked into a specific route or behavior because of foundational choices made in the past, and it has become too economically or politically expensive to jump off that path.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The systems that generate their incredible wealth are deeply historically entrenched. As we discuss, their internal equity, the low IHDI penalty, is highly effective.
Right.
The state apparatus is brilliantly designed to take oil revenue and seamlessly distribute it as universal health and education. It's a fantastic distribution mechanism. But that mechanism is completely structurally blind to external ecological risks. It functions perfectly right up until the point the oil runs out or the global market renders it obsolete.
It's a machine that does one thing perfectly, but lacks the programming to adapt to a changing environment.
And in a post-carbon era, which the world is desperately trying to accelerate toward to avoid total climate catastrophe, how will this state fund its social welfare?
That's terrifying.
How do you pay for the universal health care and the schools without the very emissions that currently doom their PHDI score? The mechanism of their immense success is simultaneously the mechanism of their ultimate vulnerability.
So what does this all mean for the future? Are we just observing a tragedy in slow motion, or does the report offer a blueprint for survival?
Well, globally, the imperative from the United Nations is clear. Human development absolutely must decouple from resource extraction.
We have to cut the cord.
We have to. We have to figure out how to maintain a global life expectancy of 73 years without burning 4.5 tons of carbon per person to do it. But for Brunei specifically, there is actually a profound silver lining buried right there in the social data we discussed earlier.
Wait, really? The silver lining is the human capital, isn't it? The muscles of the bodybuilder.
Exactly. Because Brunei has spent the last 30 years achieving such high female empowerment, remember that phenomenal GDI of 0.993, because they have excellent lifespans, and because they have invested so heavily in universal, highly equitable education, they now possess a tremendously capable, highly educated population.
The bodybuilders might be on steroids, but the muscle they build is real muscle. The brains are real brains.
Very real.
The women who are out educating the men by a full year are fully equipped and ready to work in a modern economy.
Yes. The action blueprint suggested by the report is that Brunei must urgently pivot this massive reservoir of human capital away from an extractive fossil fuel economy and toward a knowledge-based, low-carbon economy.
They have to pivot.
They have the intellectual infrastructure. They have the baseline health. They simply have to change the engine. The goal isn't to undo the progress in health and education or to dismantle the social safety net.
Right. Nobody wants that.
The goal is fundamentally changing the power source of the ship.
They need to close that massive gap between their standard HDI and their PHDI. They need to prove to the world that you can maintain a 0.837 quality of life without dropping 55 places down the rankings when you factor in the survival of the planet.
And the sobering reality is, if a country with that much accumulated wealth and that much highly educated human capital can't figure out how to decouple high development from environmental destruction, it bodes very poorly for the rest of the developing world trying to follow in their footsteps.
Wow, we have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started by looking at a resume that seemed to be the absolute peak of human achievement. A wealthy, healthy, practically equitable society where women and men live long, highly educated lives.
Right.
A society that has somehow figured out how to protect its citizens from the harsh inequalities that steal 22% of development from the rest of the globe.
But by rigorously applying the different mathematical lenses of this report, we peel back the layers to stare directly into the abyss of planetary limit.
We really went there.
We saw the true cost of that 0.837 score and realized that the prosperity is heavily borrowed from the earth.
And that brings us to the end of today's deep dive. Brunei's 55-place drop on the global rankings is dramatic. It is a statistical shock, but honestly, it serves as a massive, unavoidable mirror for all of us.
A mirror.
Yeah, because Brunei is just an extreme, highly accelerated version of the path the entire developed world is currently on.
We are all, to varying degrees, aggressively trading planetary health for human comfort. The material footprints might vary, but the fundamental transaction is exactly the same.
So as you, listening right now, look at your own community, your own country, or even just your own personal lifestyle, I want you to ask yourself a question that goes beyond the basic numbers. Are we actually achieving our high quality of life organically, or are we simply borrowing it from the planet's future? Are we paying the true physical cost of our comfort?
That's the real test.
It is. And when the bill finally comes due, when the ultimate filter is applied to our civilization's resume, where will we truly rank? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. For wrestling with the complex, hidden truths within the data, we'll catch you next time.